Welcome back to Photoshop for Photographers, and today we're going to take a look at two different items. We're going to take a look at the histogram in Adobe Camera Raw, and then I'm going to show you a cool little trick to make a non-destructive layer for a vignette. Now we have this picture of this guy, and this kind of came up in a class of mine. One of my students asked what this did, and it's just an aspect in Adobe Camera Raw that I forgot to go over. And probably the reason is because I don't actually use it, but I think it's actually helpful to beginning photographers to use. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go backwards, and to get into Adobe Camera Raw at any time, you just go up to Filter and go to Adobe Camera Raw. And we're right back into Raw. And so this is our histogram up here. And actually what he was asking me is why it was so high here. And the reason it's so high here is nothing more than that's where most of your data is in the image. So we have kind of a lot of white. There's a lot of highlights in this area. So that's why it's high here and low here, because there's not a lot of data. So a histogram just shows you where your data is inside of your image. Now, the key here is this is kind of the default. There's these two little boxes, and they aren't turned on right now. So as I move stuff, it all does is adjust the image. However, if you come up here and you click that, which is for your shadows, and this is for your highlights, these will show you in either red for the highlights or blue for the shadows when your image is clipping. And what clipping means is you lost all detail. It's too bright, so you don't want that. So you can see right here, I'll turn this on and off, that little red will kind of appear. Those areas are clipping. You do not want clipping most likely in an image. Now, clipping is okay if you have an area with no detail that is pure white with no detail. If you have that, perfectly fine. This doesn't show up in your image. So if you have this turned on, it's kind of annoying because you see it, but it's not going to show up when you print it. It's just an alert. So what this means is you're clipping this area, and it wants you to come in here and maybe darken your highlights until it doesn't clip anymore. You can see I just move my highlights down. There's a point where it's going to kind of appear. I'm going to get more, and then it's going to disappear. And now at this point, I'm not clipping my highlights and I'm good. This is the same thing that I'm using if you remember the video on the info palette inside of Photoshop, where I'm looking at that percentage of gray and I'm trying to hold that value of like 2 to 3%. Now, we also have one in blacks. We haven't totally clipped the blacks yet, but we'll do it now. So black shows up in blue. So if you have this turned on, you're going to see an area where it starts to get black. Now I'm going to turn this off for a second. This is called blocking. Basically what it means, it looks like you've got this flat black area that's filled in because you have too much contrast or too much black in your image. Now we don't want that to block up like that because it doesn't look realistic. So we'll turn this back on, and basically we just need to dial out that contrast either in your blacks, or you could open up your shadows a little bit. There's a variety of things you could do, but basically we want to get rid of that blue that shows up in the image, and that way it's not blocking out. All right, so that is the first aspect, the histogram inside of Photoshop. Now the next one is, and this is still way too contrasty. I can just tell you it's way too contrasty. So we're going to lower the contrast of this image a lot. It's still way too much, and it's too bright here. We're not going to go into tone it. So the next thing here is I'm going to need my layers palette. So we'll just go ahead and drag the layers palette over here. All right, so we've got our layers palette. I'm just going to go ahead and now we'll just leave that up actually. So we've got our image, and we want to add a vignette to this image. There's a couple different ways to do it, but this is actually my favorite. And what I will show you here is, let me see if I can find it. So just give me a second. All right, so I'm going to click in action, and this is my vignette action. And you're going to see how easy it is to do once you've made it. So you're just going to go click, and bam, just like that, we've got the vignette action. So I can turn this action on or off. It's making a vignette. Now it's very strong. And the reason I did this strong, and it's actually stronger than this, it's this strong. It allows you to do really more than you're probably going to need, but occasionally you want a really strong action. But what I can do is simply just dial that out to get it exactly where I want. This is why I like making vignette into an action, because I can make it really strong and then I can just sort of dial it out and get it exactly where I want it. It's one click, I don't have to do anything, and it makes my life a lot easier. So we're gonna go ahead and we will trash that. Now, I'm just gonna show you manually how to do what I just did. So the first thing that you need to do is do a stamped visible. And the command key for that is Command Option Shift E. All right, it would be Control Option Shift E on a PC. And that creates a stamp visible. Stamp visible means it's a duplicate of everything that you have below. Now, if we just had a flattened image like this, we could just hit Command J because we're just duplicating it. There's nothing below it. But since we had this layer, we need to do stamp visible because it takes this into effect here. So Command Option Shift E, and then it makes a stamped visible right here inside of Photoshop. Now, next thing we need to do is we need to go up to Filter, and we're actually going to go back into Camera Raw filter again. You're going to come over here to FX, and that's where this vignette lies. So we can dial this vignette in. And remember, you can make it really dark, probably darker than you actually want to. You can control your feather and anything that you want inside of this little box here. So we can make this vignette, adjust this how we think we might want them in the future. And then we're just going to go ahead and hit OK. Now I'm going to add a mask on this just for good practice. I think it's always good that way. If you do need to paint something out of the mask, it's already there and you're good to go. Now, the cool thing about this is it's just a layer, so we can turn that on and off. And then we can just come in here and reduce the opacity of this layer until we get the right amount of vignette that we want in the image. And that's really it. We took a look in how to use the histogram to stop areas from clipping, and then how to make a vignette inside of Photoshop that is non-destructive. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave those below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe.